Hi, and welcome to episode 2 of Containers, Pallets and Boxes, Sparks podcast. Episode 1 is already out there, and that was a really good session related to security and stock and compliance and health and safety. This one is called The Life of a Supply Chain Consultant or Interim, right? And today we're at the, you can see that the branding's slightly different. We're at the Warwick, University of Warwick, the Junction Innovation Centre. So thank you very much for letting us do this. I've got 2 guests with me today, not 3 like the first time. I've got Gary Twinholme, and he's from Link Logistics Services, and he is, if I've got this right, co-founder and director of the organisation. And I've also got Dan Culverhouse from Beyond Darwin. Both of these gentlemen that I have had touch points with over the last 15, 20 years. We've all worked in the industry about 30 years. And I think we're going to have some fun working out who's probably worked in the most interesting places and countries. So I'm going to start first with Gary and ask him to introduce himself, please.
Okay, so Gary Twinholme, co-founder and director at Link Logistics. Like most people, fell into logistics. I didn't, grow up going, do you know what? I really, really want to work in warehouses all my life. So fell into it when I was around 19, 20, started lumping and shunting, and then soon found that in any industry, there are people who are really good and there are people who are not so good. So started to get frustrated by people who made lots of mistakes, and then tried to put my impression on it, and that helped my career grow through problem solving. Worked at Clipper Logistics for around 10 years, finishing as head of project. Also worked at Mountain Warehouse as head of global logistics. And then about 4 years ago, over a few beers, agreed with a couple of colleagues that we would start up on our own, and we set up Link Logistics Services, offering sort of project management, going contracting. Solutions design is our big passion, is looking at a problem and saying what's the best way we can help an organization solve it.
Brilliant. And that really resonates with me. I fell into the industry completely by accident. I'd done 3 A levels, and I think it was one of the few university courses at the time that probably would have had me, if I'm honest. So anyway, thank you for that. Over to Dan Culverhouse.
Thanks, Alistair. Yep, Dan Culverhouse. I'm the founder of Beyond Darwin Limited, and we're a supply chain consultancy, fractional leadership business. And yeah, similarly to Gary, I ended up working in logistics because I was out of work and needed a job. So at about the age of 19, I took a job sticking Spanish labels on the back of M&S toiletries in a warehouse. And I did such a great job, they took me on as a picker. And really from there, I've done pretty much every operational job you could imagine within a sort of distribution centre. Ended up working at Tesco in their Crick grocery DC back in the 90s. And from there, went through a number of different operational roles, sort of ops management. Then got into development and did big distribution center builds, automation, things like that. And then went all around the world. I disappeared off to South Korea with Tesco, and then went to Czech Republic, Slovakia, Turkey. They then tasked me to come back to the UK, to which I said no thanks, and left. And ended up in the Middle East. Worked in Kuwait for a company called Al Shire, which is a big franchising business, which was a lot of fun. And from there, I came back to the UK briefly, worked bizarrely for a marketing company doing logistics, which is a bit of a unique scenario. But and then went back to the Middle East, and then ended up in Thailand, working for a big distributor out there. Did 5 years on their main board as the global head of supply chain. So yeah, it's been quite a journey. I kind of gone from picker to main board exec, and then 3 years ago, decided I had enough of all of that, came back to the UK and set up my own business and became a consultant. And here I am.
That's brilliant. And I'm going to start the train spotting bans related to this. So I'm going to go 34 countries. Has anybody been to more?
So I think after hearing Dan's introduction and you stating 34 countries, I think even if you include Ireland and Wales, I'm probably in the loadable figures. So I've been to some interesting places. Oh yeah, so I've done various trips to Europe around Belgium and Germany, and then I've done the States in both Ohio and in Pennsylvania. And then most recently been out to Saudi, which was eye-opening because I kind of had very preconceived ideas as to what I was going to find out in Saudi, and it's actually a real emerging country. So it's an exciting place to go and work, and I wouldn't be against going out there again in the near future.
No, I find that really interesting, and I'm going to ask Dan in a little while. But the cultural side of things and working in different, it's not a competition, working in different countries or businesses. But I think when we talk about the life of an interim or a supply chain specialist, I think these sort of things do come in. You have to understand the cultural elements. Every day is a learning day. It's never quite what it seems. So with that in mind, I'm going to ask you a couple of questions. Ask you a question. What's the weirdest supply chain challenge you've ever had to fix in a week when you've just started?
Who are you asking?
That's a really good question. And I'm going to ask you, Dan, as you are.
All right, I set myself up for that. So I think when you look at sort of various different, I would say challenges. I think probably the most amusing one that comes to mind is when I was in the Middle East. I was based out in Kuwait, and we set up a white gloves delivery service for one of the big American furniture retail brands. We won't talk about exactly who they are, but one day one of the, I guess we call them royal family. So one of the heirs of the Emir of Kuwait walked into the store and ordered $40,000 worth of furniture, which we had to white glove to an apartment in Kuwait. So literally you have like 3 or 4 days and I had to be there. Everybody had to be security cleared. And there's literally unpack every single item, check every millimeter of it to make sure it was okay, pack it all back up, get it there, take it to this apartment, get it in, install it all, set it up. It was there was a lot of I guess it was pressure, but I guess everybody was very worried because like you get this one wrong, everybody in Kuwait is going to know about it, and that is not going to be great for the growth of the business. But thankfully it went very well. But yeah, it was definitely an interesting experience to try and deliver to something with that amount of pressure, security, exposure. I guess it was an odd one for sure.
That's absolutely brilliant. That's going to put Gary under pressure here, I think. So, yeah. Gary, weirdest challenge for you?
Not as interesting, but furniture related. So, I was working for a fashion retailer at the time. We were at peak capacity because we were just coming into Black Friday. You couldn't swing a cat in the warehouse, and we had a sofa and some chairs delivered. We said, well, this must be at the wrong place, and we checked the PO, and no, they'd delivered to the right address. And then we noticed the name on the top of the invoice was for the CEO of the company we were working for. So we made a few phone calls, and your classic lack of communication. But because they'd recently moved back to the UK and bought a very lovely large estate, they were in the process of furnishing it all. And they'd agreed that because it wasn't fully ready, they could get everything delivered into the warehouse. And then we would make sure that it was all delivered when they wanted it during peak period. And we had all sorts. We had garden furniture. We had a statue sort of fountain that came in 8 parts. And, we were using all the MHE to try and get it located. And team leaders are often not the most forgiving people when they're in peak. And they were livid. We had high quality, decent furniture that needed to be protected. But what they saw, I have a load of junk messing up my warehouse when I'm trying to keep things flowing out and hit peak volumes. And you can't really go back onto your daily reports and say, okay, we've managed to hit this capacity, but we could have gone higher if we hadn't got all your furniture in the way. But the upshot was we got it all delivered. We had a very happy CEO, and we delivered peak. So I can't really complain.
Brilliant. And I just pressed my button a bit early because I thought you'd pause.
No, that's okay. Your face is prettier than mine.
Thank you very much for saying that. But I'm going to add one in, just a small one. I was working for a mobile phone business, and if you'll remember the fuel crisis of about 10, 15 years ago, with all the petrol stations that had run out of fuel. And I was quite young at the time, and I was called in by the head of supply chain director, and it goes, we need you to work out whether we can change our courier delivery partner. And I was like, yes, of course we can. He said, tonight. I was like, right, okay. How many deliveries have we got going out? And I actually did all the system stuff behind that. And the funny thing was that, and I'm not going to mention names to protect the innocent, but the carrier that ended up getting the business about a year later drove in with 3 or 4 vehicles ready to collect probably 1 load's worth, I would say. And they had their senior directors there, all smiling, introducing themselves for a photo shoot as well, which is highly amusing. Right, so we're going to talk about interims, and I know that we're potentially perceived that it's an expensive resource or a transformational resource. So I'm going to put a few facts out there. Forgive me for looking down. Supply chain consulting is circa 900 million to 1.2 billion pounds worth of expenditure in, let me see, 2023 and 24. And then when you look at the, that's supply chain consulting, and then you've got the interim market is about the same, 1.5 to 2 billion pounds. Now, I know that there's a perception that interims can be quite expensive, and another bit of data that I've picked up. If you have, and I'd love us to discuss this, right? If we've got a head of a function, let's just say they're earning £120,000 per annum. They've also got national insurance contributions, pensions, benefits, gym, all the other things that go with it. The potential cost of that is circa 160 to 172k per year, right? It's all rough figures. So if you divide that by 220 days, that's actually about £780 a day. Trust me on the calculations. So if you then look at an interim on a 12-month contract at, say, £900 to £1,000 a day, that costs a little bit more, right? Now, that's fine. We understand that. But I suppose my question to both of you is, to Gary, I'll start with Gary. What makes an interim supply chain specialist different from a permanent hire based on those costs?
Okay, so I think essentially it's experience. And I can imagine a whole raft of people would recoil in their chairs when they hear me talk about experience, because, what do you know about my business that I don't know about it myself? But it's that breadth of experience as opposed to sort of depth of experience. So you might have been around 30 years and know your business inside out. But that also means that you've only known your business for the last 30 years. So I think what a decent consultant will do is give that breadth of experience and almost that detachment as well, that you can come in and you can look at a situation with a real, fresh, non-emotional set of eyes. And generally, none of us want to stay around that long. We're in this industry because we like to move on. So we can come in, we want to make big impacts for you, and then go on and do the same for somebody else.
And just on that, the value side of that, it's not to come in and just be there 12 months, is it? It is literally, like you say, to make an impact, but also to add value along the way. And it's that emotional side of wanting to do something that I think interims work with. Is that a fair comment?
Yeah, I think completely. And I think what we also do is we talk about a 6-month or a 12-month gig, but ultimately you want those impacts to be lasting way beyond when you've left. So the best consultants will come in and help enact some cultural change, which means that the benefits will be seen for years and years to come, and not just for the 3 months you're there, 12 months you're there. I think the other thing that we need to consider is that we talk about cost or value. So when you introduced this section, you talk very much about the cost of a consultant, whereas there you spoke about value. If I was looking to bring in a piece of automation for a client, then you can be sure that I would bring in a return on investment. And what we don't do up front with consultants is that return on investment piece. Now, what I do think is that a consultant who's worth their salt will try and do that as part of their initial engagement, is say, okay, I've had a look at your challenges. This is what we can do for you. This is what we think it will cost you. And these are the benefits that you should see over the next 6-12 months. And then these are the benefits you'll continue to see after our engagement.
Absolutely. And I think that really brings on to the next question, which I'll ask Dan. When is the right time for a company to bring in someone like you and me?
I mean, I guess really it's when there's a need for something to change, right? I mean, I think if they've got something extraordinary going on, be that a new DC build, operational recovery crisis, you want to outsource, you want to insource, you want to, it's when there's something that's not the day job, really. I mean, I think one of the key things around a consultant on interim is this bias for action, right? We come in to deliver something quite specific, and so we expect to have a clear outline of, like, this is what you want, and we're not encompassed by the politics of the business, right? So we can come in and just get on with it and do it, and we don't need to be, so we say, tread as carefully as maybe a full-time employee. And if you're a supply chain director in any business and you've got to open a new distribution center or put a piece of automation in or something like that, you can't do that alongside your day job and expect it not to be a disaster. So, it's a really difficult, complex change, and it requires a different type of thinking, a different type of person. And so, that is in a perfect time. So bring somebody in. Yeah, they're going to cost you a bit more, but you know what? The cost of getting it wrong, we've all been through bad startups, right? And failed projects. The cost of failure is enormous. So the investment is normally well worth it, because you get somebody who's experienced, knows what they're doing, is not encumbered by the rest of the business, and can just deliver what you ask them to deliver. I think that's what determines whether it's the right time or not. If it's just your day job, I mean, sometimes you might just be filling in for somebody, right? And that's a little bit of a different, more of an interim than a consultant's job. But generally, I think it's when something needs to shift.
Excellent, thank you. And I'm going to ask you a question, Gary, at this point. How do you build trust fast when you land in a business? Because picking up on the points you both made, and I know that I've been there myself. You walk in day one and you're like, right, get out of the car, right? You meet everybody. And most people, they do a permanent hire role. They may do an induction and may do a tour of the business. How do you land fast? It's a different mindset, isn't it?
Yeah, I think a lot of it's about visibility, and that's visibility not only of what you're trying to achieve, but also of you as a person. And I think you tailor that depending on who you're with, which of your stakeholders, because I think we initially talk about how do we gain trust of our client because they brought us in and they want to see some result. But quite often in operations, the biggest challenges you'll find is with the teams that sit on the shop floor, because they know it all. They've been screaming about some of the challenges for years and years and years, and their management teams don't deal with it, or that's the perception on the shop floor. And then you've been brought in and you can't tell me anything about my job that I don't already know. So I think, getting down onto the shop floor and engaging with the people who see it on the coalface is really, really important. I think being really clear on what your brief is, and the changes to that brief, because I think we've all been in a situation where you get a really nice statement of work and then you walk in and go, oh, this isn't going to be an easy task unless we fix A, B, and C alongside it. But rather than just run off and do that, let's explain why that's needed for our clients, and then put together a really clear plan and then give regular updates. So transparency, communication, and then build that credibility by acting fast. Go in. There is always low-hanging fruit. And quite often people are desperately trying to grab it and just haven't got the capacity rather than the capability. So you can help create that capacity that allows them to see quick results, which then buys you that credibility to start getting the longer term plan in place.
Perfect. And in terms of the long-term plan, I see advantages of permanent hires, and it does depend on where a business is, shall we say. I'm going to put this out there to Dan. What advantages do you think of a permanent hire over an interim? Let's have that conversation.
I mean, the immediate one is normally cost.
Yes.
A permanent hire is without doubt in the long run a cheaper resource. But permanent hires are about driving strategy, driving stability, developing the people, a consistency and reliability in what you're doing. And I think if that's what your business wants and that's what it needs, then a permanent hire. And let's be honest, every company needs a permanent supply chain lead. We're not going to come in and run their supply chain for them. We might come in, run it for a while, or take part of it and make a change. But permanents are there to drive the long-term strategy of the business and continuous improvement, all those good things. If that's what you need, then you should only ever use a consultant or an interim as a stepping stone. If you've got a gap, if someone's left and you need to, you haven't got a replacement, bring somebody in. They can help you. They can keep steady the ship, keep things moving. But beyond that, you need somebody who's embedded in the business, can learn the intricacies of that business, build the relationships all across that business to ensure your kind of long-term, prosperity and good service. That's what a permanent hire does, and we've all done it at some points in our career, and it's great, rewarding work. It's just different, right? It's just a very different job to being a consultant, which is coming in to make a difference, a quick difference, an immediate difference. And I think Gary's absolutely right. That connection with the people you're going to be working with is essential. They don't trust you, and they don't see that you've got some capability, and you're not listening to them, and they don't think there's any benefit of them helping you. Guess what? You'll fail because they will just throw everything in the way. But if you connect with them, they can see that you're gonna, yes, you're here to do a job, and that job has been determined by the management. But by listening to them and talking to them, you can help them out too. So what is it that's difficult for you? And then maybe we can solve those problems too at the same time. And then you get the connection, and then they're all with you, and it makes a difference.
Yeah, I think really valid points, and especially around that consistency. So I think when we talk about, is it a interim or a perm hire, it's actually, is it an interim or a perm role? So I wouldn't necessarily advocate to have a interim ops lead or GM, because what you want is them enacting the mid to long term goals of the organization, and you want that consistency across the business. Whereas projects on the other side, we're seeing a lot more career project managers. And what I've seen is that quite often a project manager, we have a life cycle of a project. So you tend to kind of be really busy setting up, and then you get into your steady flow, and then you have your go live that gets really busy again. And then you almost kind of wind down, ready for your next project, and off you go. Where you've got career project managers, particularly in 3PLs, client A wants you to run at 1,000,000 miles an hour to deliver project A. But the moment you've done that, you're thrown at client B, who wants you to run at 1,000,000 miles an hour to deliver project B. And project managers who I've seen who are perm hires are feeling really pressured. And we're in danger of creating a lot of burnout across project managers as full-time employees. Whereas when you've got a bespoke team, and when I say a bespoke team, it might be bringing in interim resource, or it might be that you've stood up an interim team within your full-time staff, but you've just put them on one project. What you see is it becomes all encompassing. It's something that people are passionate about, and they'll run at 1,000,000 miles an hour, they'll deliver it, and then they get the decompression of going back into their day job. So I think, again, if we look at the roles and say, actually, that's ideal, and it comes back to your point around change, is that we have something that's very bespoke to our business, that's time framed, that we need to bring someone in to help us deliver. Versus, we're going to be doing this day in, day out, and trying to do continuous improvement on it for the next 5-10 years.
Something I've learned over the years, which I think is always quite an interesting thing, is that there's this tendency, is like, oh, this guy's been running the operation for years, he'll be the ideal person to take us through to this next, maybe it's a new DC build or an automation implementation or something. In general, operators make terrible project managers. They're very different skill sets. Operators, everything's immediate, it's time driven, you're pressured, and you react. Operators are great at reacting to situations. Project managers, it's exactly the opposite. A good project manager works damn hard 2 years before it goes live to make sure everything's in place, everything is planned, all the I's are dotted and the T's are crossed. And it's a very self-driven, you set your own priorities, because, if you're a project manager and you're going live in 2 years and you do nothing for a week, no one's going to notice. They'll notice when you go live because you're not ready. But, so they're completely opposite skill sets. This sort of bit of this thinking of, he knows what we do very well, so he'll be a great project manager, is one of the big mistakes that companies make when they go into these changes. And when you realize that project management is actually quite a significant skill and is very different to operations, and you don't normally see an easily transition between one to the other.
Absolutely.
I find that fascinating, and I'm glad you talked about the emotional, the burnout aspects, potentially the politics. We all know that there might be something, for example, just to add to some of the things you said, that a business might be being put up for sale and people might not realize. So therefore, there's that aspect, isn't it? So, and I think you both make great, brilliant points about the skill sets of people that you're actually paying for, and they are commodities. So I'm going to change this around a little bit, in terms of we've talked about project managers, program managers, going in and delivering. So and there's that big impact at the start. We've all talked about that. And then there's that finish. And then it could be a finish and there's a small break, or it could be a finish and like click your fingers, you're thinking about something completely different. So I'm going to ask about life between gigs. So how do you manage that, walking into that sliding door moment where you walk into one place after just being somewhere else, and you've also got perhaps a little bit of help that you're doing? So I'm going to ask that of Gary first.
Okay, so first of all, I don't tend to take a lot of downtime. That's just me as a person. I'm the same at the weekend. I can't have a weekend where I'm sat in the house. So I'm out training the rugby team. I'm out taking the kids to football. If we've got nothing on at the weekend, we're going away. There's no way I'm just sitting around the house, because I like to be on the go constantly. So for me, I don't tend to need that decompression. For me, it's that analogy of a change is as good as a rest.
Yes.
So for me, if I've been in the same contract for a period of time, I know I need to go. I know I've done my time here. I'm starting to feel like an employee, and therefore I need to go and change and do something that's going to really pique my interest, that's going to make sure I continue with the right levels of energy, because I start to see myself feel a little bit more lethargic and a bit more, this is becoming monotonous. So then for me, the switch to kind of change to something completely different comes really easily, because I'm yearning for it by then.
Absolutely. And same question for Dan.
I think similar. I think, part of the mentality of people who do jobs like we do are, we're like kids in a sweet shop, right? We just like whatever's new, let's go and do that. It's so whenever you're coming to an end of a project, sometimes it's always a bit sad, sometimes a bit emotional, but actually, the thrill of moving on to something new is always great. I definitely can relate to what Gary's saying about that. And I have taken quite a few breaks in the last few years. Some because I decided to, some I haven't decided to, and just no one's given me anything to do. For me, I kind of, when it first started having that kind of scenario, it worried me a bit. It's like, oh my God, am I out? Am I no good anymore? But you kind of get past that fairly quickly. Kind of, there's a little bit of an ego bashing, but you kind of just got to get past it and use the time. It's great. I mean, I've had some time this summer, and thankfully coordinate that with one of the best summers in UK's history of recent years. So I've had a lovely summer of hiking around, spending time with my kids, It's been brilliant to be able to do that. And, now getting back into things, which is nice. So I think you've got to feel comfortable with what you do and have things in your life. So I like to go hiking. I like to play the guitar very badly. Been trying for years and still would never do it in public. Only my family are ever imposed on that awful sound. But it's just things. And then, and you also choose to learn stuff when you're not working. There's always things to be to upskilling yourself on, especially these days. So you take a bit of time out and maybe do a training course or just read a decent book that you didn't have time to read when. So I think I've never had trouble filling my days. I'm married, so if I ever show any signs of not doing anything, my wife's always got a list. So but yeah, a bit like Gary, when you come out of a big, difficult, stressful project, actually starting something new is exhilarating. So you can't wait to get on with the next one normally. So yeah, maybe we're just freaks like that. I don't know.
I find that interesting, your perspectives, because I am exactly the same as Gary in terms of I have very busy weekends, and I had a quiet Sunday this weekend, and after a couple of hours I did a long walk, and I'm like, right, what am I doing now? Because you're always thinking, and that next project is always really exciting. So I appreciate that, and I think you're right. People that do the interim thing or go in and do a transformation, just think in a slightly different way. So I'm going to do a quick question to both of you. Are we in these sort of roles unemployable in a permanent role? And I'll start with Gary.
So I wouldn't say unemployable as such, and particularly these days, because I think we couldn't cope with one company and be sort of one company people and stay with the same business for 30 years. But I don't think that society's like that anymore. Whereas for my parents, it was very much you get a job and you stay with that organization until you retire. I don't see that now. And I think that's probably what's really opened up the contractor market, is because when we talked earlier about permie hires against interim hires, well, a perm hire might only be 2 years if you've got someone who's really career minded, and that's if you can get them to do a full cycle. I would expect people to do at least 2 years so that they've been through a kind of full peak, a post peak, and a build up for the next one. But I've seen people who have jumped from job to job to job. So I think, could I be that person? Probably not, because to me, I want to go and work with a business for a while, and I have been employed up until the last 4 years. But I think we can adapt and be employed, but I don't think we would find it personally fulfilling. So for me, I need to be doing something new all the time. If I end up back in a site working for the next 5 years within the same operation, I think you'd be carting me off.
Well, let's hope that doesn't. Dan, go for it.
Do I think I'm unemployable? No, I think I think what happens, and it's probably with age, it's got something to do with it as well, is I think that corporate life, whilst can be very rewarding, can also be very frustrating. There's a lot of politics, there's a lot of bureaucracy, and you have a direct boss, right? One that really has an influence over your future. Even if people think consultants don't have a boss, they do, but that boss changes, regularly. Yeah. So I think that I have found it in the last few perm roles that I've done, harder and harder to tolerate the bureaucracy and the politics, the things getting in the way of getting a job done. And I think, so in that sense, I think I'm less employable, because I think I look very hard at who I'm going to be working for and the culture of a business. But I wouldn't say I wouldn't go back into a perm job. It would depend what it was. I worked for a retailer for 15 years. In that time, I probably did 6-7 different jobs. So it didn't really feel like I was in the same job for all that time. I worked in different countries, I worked in different distribution centers, different roles. So it felt like you were changing quite a lot anyway. But yes, for me, it's about the relationships and the culture of that business. If they allow me to do the things that I know I can do well and, let's say, blossom and bloom and, deliver, then I think it would continue to be a great experience. But if you then end up with a boss who maybe is not I don't want to say supply chain expert, but doesn't really understand it, but it's one of those kind of controlling type personalities that wants to get in the way, and he's not thinking he's getting in the way or she's getting in the way, but it's more that through their lack of knowledge that they're restricting how you're able to progress because they feel as a boss they need to be involved. I think the best bosses recognize when you've got somebody who knows what they're doing, just give them the freedom to get on with it and they can do that. And in those circumstances, I'd be very happy to be employed again in that way. But I wouldn't tolerate, things that are going to frustrate my existence in a role. And that's why consulting works for me, because, I can go in, I can decide, do I want to do this job or not? And if I do it, you go in and you do a job and then you get out. It's not forever, So even if you end up, let's be honest, even when you're consulting, you end up working for people who are maybe not our favorite people. But there's a lifetime to it. You're here to do with that, so you get it done and you walk away. And that's where I guess the unemployable thing comes from, is that if you end up in a permanent job, it's much harder to walk away. But I agree with Gary. I think that today, even people who are in permanent jobs, they're not as permanent as they think. I think everybody is effectively on a gig economy now, and you're in a job as long as you're adding value or they can afford it. And if the business can't, you'll be gone. So you're not really any more stable than a consultant, really. It just costs a little bit more money to get rid of you. But, I don't think permanent jobs are permanent. So, I don't think there's that much difference. I think it's a different state of mind for consultants where we know we're only going to be here for a period. Whereas, which I guess for us is great because we have that control, we have that knowledge, we're not disillusioned in any kind of way, don't have any kind of unreasonable expectations or even reasonable expectations, but we have a very clear remit. Whereas if you're in a permanent hire, you can be walking around with that false pretense that I've got a job forever here, and let's be honest, you haven't.
Yeah. I think you make some great points there, and I was going to talk about the where we are with economies without getting political, because that's not what we do. But I think you're right related to the gig economy. I think COVID had a major impact on the supply chain industry to the benefit, right? For a couple of reasons. Firstly, that bit of the gig economy aspect of it, you realize that you can work in a hybrid way and actually do work, right? The other side of it, I think, and I'm really passionate about this, is the if you go to a party or a pub or a dinner party and you talk to somebody and they say, oh, what do you do? I work in supply chain. Let's be honest, and we're all probably agreeing with this. 25 years ago, people would have gone straight over the top of somebody's head. Whereas now it's like, oh, right, because of the COVID, it became, well, it's quite an important thing. We almost got key worker status next to people working in the fire brigade and in the NHS. So things have changed. And I'm going to pick out IR35, not to get political, by the way, but thoughts on it related to how people are employed. I'm going to Gary, just a couple of points on that.
Yeah, I think the main point around it, and I'm not against IR35, and when you look into it and what protections it gives to a lot of people, it's very worthwhile. But I think specifically for supply chain contractors, what it's done is it's increased costs. So quite often you'll now find that there are recruiters' fees if you need to go through a recruiter rather than a direct engagement. Then because of a nervousness and a lack of understanding of IR35, some gigs will be sort of wrongly judged to be inside IR35, because if you say that this next engagement is inside IR35 and it could have been outside IR35, no one's going to penalise you. if it could have been outside R35, or sorry, if you labeled it as outside R35 and it's borderline and then it's judged that it should have been an inside R35 engagement, then there's some heavy penalties there. So what we find is that large organizations will err on the side of caution, will try and do more engagements inside R35. A lot of contractors will then go, okay, well, I've been an independent contractor, so I'll go for an umbrella company. So then there's a fee there for the umbrella company, there's a fee for the recruiter, and there's some tax implications for the individual. So what would have been an engagement at one rate is now sometimes 30, 40% more expensive than it was 3-4 years ago. So I think we've just got to be careful that we're not driving in cost there. I mean, we will generally try and look for outside IR35 roles, but that's because we've spent the time and effort to understand IR35, and we make sure that, you know, the gigs we take are truly outside IR35. And again, that's partly because that suits our attitude. We want to be in, we want to deliver something quick, and we want to move on. And that's why we'll deliver services rather than resources. But, you know, I do understand the nervousness. And for a long time, I think people became career consultants. So I've worked with people who had been in organizations for 5 years on an interim contract, on a day rate, and you go, that could have been a permie hire, but you won't see that now. Generally, people move on from an organization within 12 months.
Yeah, interesting. And I think you summed it up really well there. Right, I'm conscious of time, and your time particularly is very valuable, I know. So let's do quick fire questions. I'm going to throw them out. Literally, it's just a bit of fun. First thought, and just see where you go with it. So, Dan, forecasting or firefighting?
Well, there's no doubt firefighting is more fun than forecasting, but only in the short term. So I'd have to say forecasting is the best way.
Okay, thank you. What acronym, Gary, is the worst acronym you've heard in supply chain?
JFDI. I hate it. It's that difference between, again, being more strategic, tactical, and maybe project and operations, as we talked earlier. I think JFDI for operations is more of a way of life, and I think it's right. But when you hear it during sort of projects or in a engagement, you go, well, why? I always want to know the data why. Why are we doing this? Because if you can't give me the logic as to why we're doing it, we shouldn't be doing it.
Sorry, I want to give you another one on this because I've got one and I just think it's hilarious. I worked with a business who they had a bit of a motto of keep it simple, stupid, right? Which I completely agree with. I think it's very good, but they always called it KISS.
KISS, yeah.
So you're in a meeting and they'd be like, "Come on, guys, KISS," and I'm like, "What? Excuse me?"
Landed yourself an HR bother there.
It never became normal, but they used it all the time, and it was just hilarious. But so I understand what was behind it, but yeah, being asked to kiss in a meeting, I think, is inappropriate, personally.
Yeah, I've noted that, and I'll make sure that I don't do that for you. So just to make
I never kiss you in a meeting.
Yeah, just to make you feel comfortable. Right, okay, next one, Gary. What's your red flag in a supply chain operation?
I think when people come to me and introduce themselves as their length of service, that's my big red flag. Yeah, before they've given you their name half the time. Yeah, oh, I've been here 40 years. Oh, I've been here 20 years. I go, okay, here we go. We're going to instantly meet a bit of friction. So yeah, that's my big red flag.
I'm going to add to that. The one that gets me is oh, that's not my pay grade.
Yes.
And I'm just like, oh, so you're allowing that to happen. So thank you for that. Dan, have you ever had to wing it in the boardroom?
Well, not as a consultant, but when I was employed, yes. I went. We had a DC go live in Singapore. It's when I was working out in Asia, and the local team, in their wisdom, decided to go live 4 weeks early. I was on holiday in Malta, and I got a call from the CEO going, "It's all gone wrong in Singapore." I'm like, "It can't be. We're not even live yet." And they're like, "Oh yeah, we are." Anyway, so I had to fly back and da. Anyway, it just so happened I landed in Singapore, went in, and it was an absolute disaster. And my luck, the executive board were meeting in Singapore at the same time, and I got called. I'd literally been off the plane like 12 hours. I got called to go and stand in front of the board and explain what was going wrong. So no time to prepare. Literally just had to go in. I mean, I just had to say, look, I don't know everything yet, but this is what's happening. We'll get past it, but there are some serious things that have gone wrong and that shouldn't have happened, which I can't support. But rest assured, I'm here and I'll fix it. And we did. We got it fixed eventually. It took a while. But and to be honest, I think just being that open and honest and real with them, I got a huge amount of support from it. They were just like, whatever you need, just give us a call. And they were great at solving some big problems for us to get us back online properly. But it should never have happened. But I'm walking into that meeting, completely unprepared, completely jet lagged, and ready to face a barrage of questions. It was pretty uncomfortable, but I think I'm trying very hard not to say the swear word, but no BS seemed to work. So
I think that's brilliant, and sometimes you've just got to go with it and just be. The honesty is the biggest powerful tool there, isn't it? It's just like, this is where we are, and then you find people do come together. So
I was too tired to try and think of another story, to be honest.
That's brilliant. So okay, so let's well, I think we're getting close to wrapping up. So I think one piece of advice for somebody thinking of going into interim supply chain for Gary.
So for me, my biggest bit of advice would be do it. No, I think it's about having a support network around you. So for me, I'd have never done it on my own. I'd have never gone as an independent contractor. So it was only because I've got the fantastic support of my two business partners. And I've also, it's going to sound so cheesy, got a hugely supportive wife. She's always backed me in my career. And then more recently, I've been able to return the favor as she's exited teaching and funnily enough, gone into project management. But I think having people around you, and that can be family, it can be friends, it can be colleagues, but surround yourself by good people and then just make the leap.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely right. Let me just say one thing. Know what you're good at. Oh, did I not press the button?
Press your button.
Sorry. Know what you're good at. I think don't try to be something you're not, because in this game you'll get found out very quickly and that your reputation is everything. So don't pretend that you know something if you don't. Just stick with what you're good at.
I think your point.
Sorry, go on.
I was just going to say, I think your point earlier around being confident in your area, and then that sort of, I call it contractor anxiety. So actually, if you're going to have some downtime, build your buffer, have some downtime in between. Do not make the mistake of panicking. And to your point there, going and taking on a role that's not your bag, just because you can probably wing it, because you'll get found out really, really quickly. Absolutely. And you'll miss the opportunities where you really have a chance to shine. And don't get me wrong, we've been there. When we first started off our business, we were looking at opportunities and going, oh, is this right for me or is it not? Unfortunately, we got some work through contacts we'd worked with previously, and that allowed us to kind of showcase what we're good at. But our specialism is in fulfillment, so warehouses and final mile. We are not going to start to talk about ships and containers because it's not our bag. But for people who don't know about supply chain, they see it as one massive role that you can do all of it. So we'll constantly get inquiries about, can you come and have a look at our freight forwarding? And we say, no, it's not for us. And we'll try and point them in the direction of people rather than just say no. But fully support you. Like you stick to what you're good at and you'll have a good career. If you try and be a jack of all trades, then actually you're, cliche again, but master of none.
And it's hard to turn them down, right? When you're not, if you're not being overwhelmed with leads and opportunities, and someone comes along and is offering you a nice amount of money to go and do something, the temptation is to do it because you want to earn. But if it's not your bag, my guidance, don't do it, because if you get a reputation of that, you're finished. Then you'll have to go and get a perm job.
Yes, and none of us want that. And I think it's hard as well because you don't want to turn down work, And that's why we try and direct people elsewhere. But at the end of the day, your reputation will go, and everything we do is built on reputation.
100%.
So yeah, stick to what you're good at, and then don't be afraid to turn work down. I mean, the other thing I'd say to people is I approached it. I've always struggled with the fact that organizations aren't good at strategy. So I've always seen the gaps in strategy. Why can't we just have a plan we all stick to? So when we started our business, I tried that. I thought we're going to have a pipeline. It's going to be fantastic. And the reality is, for interim work, people pick up the phone and say, "Can you come in this week? Can you come in next week?" If you're trying to plan something 6 months out, it isn't going to work. Just trust in the fact that you're going to get to the last week, 2 weeks of your engagement, and then start looking, or take the sensible step of build yourself a buffer, and then go and accept that you might be off for a month, 2 months, 3 months. I mean, one of my business partners carries a year's buffer at all times, and he's never in a rush to look for his next engagement. Whereas for me, I'd go stir crazy.
Do you know what? I think you made some great points. And by the way, but you've both been really open, and I really appreciate that. And you're right about having buffers, and it is a nice feeling when your car's paid for and you've got money in the bank, because actually that sounds wrong, but I think it helps you make really good decisions. And I'm seeing two people for the benefit of the screen nodding at that point, because you are not making so many emotional decisions. You're actually making a good decision for the business. So I'd like to sum that up by saying, thanks for coming on about and talking about supply chain consulting, talking about interims, the reason to have them, the reasons not to have them. I knew that potentially it could be quite a dry subject, but I'm so pleased that you've come at it like you have. It's like us at Spark, we focus in on inventory cost reduction. That's what we do, and we're really good at it, and we can provide resource to do it. And we're not customs people, we know that. But being interim networks, we know a lot of people that have, and I know that just to finish off, you've both engaged brilliantly. You've not met each other before today.
No, we have not.
And I knew that it was going to go well. So, and I know that there'll be an instant connection, and the connections will be made. So thank you so much for coming on to both of you. This is going to come out on the normal channels, I'm going to say now, of Spotify. It's on YouTube. It'll come out in the next couple of weeks. There is going to be another episode coming up for recording, but a mental note to self, Warwick were an absolutely fantastic, and you've seen that their branding's here. So I'm going to say, Gary, thanks for coming on. You've been brilliant.
No, thank you for having us, and it's great to meet Dan as well. So hopefully do some more work in the future.
And again, Dan, thanks for coming on. You've been brilliant.
Yeah, my pleasure too. And I never got to say how many countries I've been to, but I think it's more than your 34. So
yes, I deliberately was going to ask the question because I was counting as you went, and I'm like thinking South Korea. There's bound to be loads. I've been to Singapore. I've been to Thailand as well. I never realised we'd both been in Thailand.
Oh yes.
So thanks for your time.
My
Very
pleasure.
much appreciated,
Enjoyed it.
gentlemen.